Oh,
It's
not
huge.
coffee. This is
Cocoa?
peppermint tea.
Oh, that sounds really good. It's only
It's
winter time though. Is that a summertime drink?
what?
Is that a summertime drink? Or is that just your favorite?
Peppermint tea is an all-time drink for me.
Uh,
It's just, wakes up my brain in the morning.
mm-hmm. Are you a big tea drinker in general?
I'm more of a coffee drinker, but
Yeah.
peppermint tea is my work drink. When I
Okay.
work, I drink peppermint tea.
It's the feel good drink. Um, do you have any plans for Memorial Day weekend? That's coming up next weekend. Hopefully you hit the beach.
No,
Oh no, did you even
no,
remember
I
it's Memorial
actually
Day?
completely forgot. I don't remember that it's Memorial Weekend.
It's all right. It's okay. I think we're gonna hit the beach.
Well, and you? Do you have any plans? Oh,
Yeah, I
that's
think.
good.
Yeah, I think we are gonna hit the beach. So really looking forward to that. Hopefully we get some good weather though. You never know with Houston. It could rain for like all day and like. Although I've noticed that
Yeah,
like.
I mean, I think this year is pretty good. This year we haven't been hit by the crazy heat yet.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. So anyway, today I'm joined by Professor Judy Wu here at the University of Houston, more of a theoretical physical organic professor here. So really not within my area of expertise. So I'm actually really looking forward to talking to her today, talking to you today. But first, hopefully we can, we'll start with a little bit about yourself, and the audience can get to know you a little bit. So you actually grew up in Taiwan, and so you went to undergrad over there in Taiwan. I actually not really familiar with Taiwan culture, so I was hoping even just like a little bit. What are some of like the um, I don't know how to put this. Maybe like cultural staples of Taiwan, like some things that maybe other people
yeah, I
wouldn't know
think
about.
tell me. Well, in contrast to the US, Taiwan
Sure.
is a very small island, so you get a lot of different types of people, and 30 minutes you're in the mountains, 30 minutes you're at the sea.
Mm.
So that's kind of fun to be at both in one day. And there are actually places on the East Coast that you can go bike riding. On one side, you see very tall mountains. On the other side, you see the ocean. Lots of food. Um, and a lot of influence from cultures just nearby. And I think especially the city where I grew up in Taiwan, it's called Hsinchu City. It's
Mhm.
about 1 hour south from Taipei by car, 15 minutes by bullet train.
Okay.
um, that's kind of where the first science-based park in Taiwan was the TSMC is there, the Taiwan Semiconductor
Yeah.
manufacturing company. That kind of was you get a very high density population of engineers and scientists and expats. So that's kind of the specifically for the city that I grew up in.
It, anything you miss about Taiwan that you can't really get over here? I mean, obviously food's gonna be a big one, but like anything you kind of miss?
I think the
Yeah.
food and the walking,
Yeah.
the
Oh, especially in Houston. This is
everything is
not a
so
walkable
close
city.
by. There's so No, so I mean, usually in the US you have one city and then you have another, you drive for like an hour or two, you have another city. But in Taiwan, because it's such a small island, everything is continuous. There is no, you just walk and there's like things. And so
Yeah.
I really miss the walkable aspect of that. You walk to a restaurant, you walk to a bookstore, you
Yeah.
walk to the night market.
And in Houston, you literally chose the least walkable city in the entirety of the United States. So
Well, as an academic, I think I don't choose. I just go where the job is.
touche, touche, touche. um, that's really
But
cool.
yeah, I mean,
What was?
Houston is.
Yeah, I mean, Houston's a good city. Just you got to drive everywhere, and it is a cultural dump as well. Like there's if any culture you can imagine is here, maybe except for the Irish. I really haven't seen many Irish people here, but that's okay. Um, what are like some of your like favorite childhood memories over in Taiwan, like growing up, like things you were doing?
Well, maybe to paint a picture for you about me as a child. probably everyone has someone like Judy in their classroom growing up. So I'm kind of like the troublemaker, a troublemaker kid slash also a tomboy. So if you put that combination together, there's a lot of mischief and a lot of fun.
Mm.
So I think, in high school, I had a pack of guy friends. We would go play basketball at night, go on some late night bike ride adventures, like all kinds of mischief.
That's really cool.
So I'm probably I'm the one of the most often called to the principal's office type of kid.
I
A
definitely
lot
don't
of
have
time
that.
spent a lot of time spent standing against the wall during class times. So that's me.
That's a flex. That is a flex that I do not have. So I congratulate you on that.
No, I
um,
was like that for about 18 years, and I think these childhood experiences, they can shape a lot of your career path and your how you are. I mean, I feel like even now as a faculty, I feel like a lot of that childhood experience of standing against a wall that really has a lot of influence on my current career.
how
When you
so?
stand against a if you when you stand, so from what you're, I guess you don't have experience standing in front of a wall for hours. When you stand in front of a wall for hours, it is extremely boring. So you need to think of something to do. And so a lot of times what I used to do was I kind of invented this game it's called the connection game. You stand in front of the wall and you try to think of two most unrelated things, let's say say a sheep and a mug, and then you try to make connections between those two very seemingly distinct items. And so I would say I had years of practicing playing that game.
That is
And
really
another
cool.
thing is that when you are a troublemaker, usually you don't do very well academically. And that was
Mm.
also true for me for the first 18 years of my life. But when you don't do well academically, you get really familiar to the feeling of failure.
Mm.
So you try, you try, but you failed. And I think a large part of the faculty job is to make peace with the failure experiences that you will often get.
You are
So
a
I think that those childhood, those experiences kind of tie into build up to my experiences now as a
yeah.
faculty.
You are you literally invented the connection game. You know that's actually a thing now on the internet, right? Where like people will go to Wikipedia and like they'll like I don't know any like two famous people like Taylor Swift or and I don't know think of any person and they try to connect them. So now in Wikipedia you can like click on links and stuff like that. So you like
Yeah,
start a one person or one thing and you try to get to the other person and like as fast as possible. And that's like a real game on social media.
yeah, I guess it is a little bit like that. Yes, yes. So that is what I used to play when was standing in front of the walls.
Well, if you weren't such a good, well, so-called good little mischief student, how did you, what were kind of your initial interest in like STEM then, or like chemistry and stuff like that? Like how does that tie in at all?
You know, I I never received a chemistry set as a birthday present, so
Mm.
I actually did not have any early interest in chemistry. And actually, the reason that I went into chemistry was because I was very bad at it, and I'll tell you about that later. But as a child and teenager, my initial goals were to either become an artist or to become Jane Goodall, go to the forests of Africa and observe animals. You might say that both quite romantic goals, but I soon learned that to become an artist, you need more than a usual dose of talent.
Yeah.
And I also learned that to be a very good biologist, you need to be good at chemistry. And
Mm.
so, despite being very bad at chemistry and actually initially having very little interest in chemistry, I decided to spend 4 years and try to get better at it. So in Taiwan, usually after high school, you take this college entrance exam, It's an exam. It's for all subjects: English, Chinese, physics, chemistry, mathematics, and so on. And after that, based on your total score, you get to pick. You put a list of schools and the departments that you want to go into. Most
Mm.
people put like 20 or 30 choices just so you're sure that you will get into one of them. I think I only put seven, and all of them were chemistry. And if you ask me, so how did you score on chemistry for your college exam? I think
Eh.
I scored, I don't remember if it was 21 or 31 over 100, but it was some very pathetic score. But I wanted to be a good biologist, and I was very good at biology, but I decided that, if that's what it takes to become a good biologist, I will spend 4 years trying to get better at chemistry.
Hmm. Well, I was gonna say real quick. I mean, we can come back to this later on, but don't you paint or draw? Don't you still do that though, right? Like at least I saw on your website,
Oh,
anyways. I see like
I do that every day, actually.
okay,
Most days, not this week because of my COVID.
yeah,
But most days, I try to wake up at around 6 or so, and I sketch either watercolor or paint.
hmm.
I actually have them right here.
Hey,
Sometimes
let's.
I paint. Sometimes I sketch dogs. Sometimes gesture drawing.
That's really cool.
So this is color pencil, but I also like ink drawing.
Those
So
are really good.
it's a we can talk about that later, but I think it's a
Yeah,
kind of a self-care. It's a self-care, very important aspect of my life.
yeah, we'll definitely return to that because I'm very interested in that. I like I painted two things. I actually took a painting class sophomore year of college, and it was really
Ah,
and it was literally more of a self care thing as well. Like, and I don't know the
uh-huh.
first thing about painting, but it was super just nice to just get in there and just not really worry about anything and just paint. That actually would be a nice career, honestly.
Yes.
Just be like an art teacher, like a college thing, like a college. That would actually be pretty nice. But we'll come back to that. We'll circle back to that later on. So okay, so you didn't really score well on the entrance exams. Do you is it was it really your lack of knowledge, or were you like not a good like test taker? Maybe a bit,
I
bit of
am not a
both.
good test.
Yeah,
I am not a good test taker. I
yeah,
think I still am not, and I may never become a good test taker.
yeah. Fair enough.
Um, but t- the testing is kind of a competition of who is the best at pattern matching.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Hmm.
it is very separate from how to write well, how to think creatively. I think it's it's a different aspect of different measure of intelligence.
Hmm. Now, how was your
But I
so after the
hmm?
exams and so how was kind of like your overall experience? I think hopefully I don't butcher this name. Correct me if I'm wrong, but um, Tunghai University. Hopefully I pronounced that
Yes, very
correctly.
good job.
Thank you, thank you.
Um,
That'll be all from me. But yeah, so how was that
so
experience?
I Donghai University. So I think that uh, entering Donghai University and attending the chemistry department in Donghai University really was the turning point of when I started to develop really significant interest in chemistry.
Yeah,
I had an extremely good organic chemistry teacher, Cheng Tong Lin. Uh, I don't know how it is in the US, but in Taiwan at least, high school chemistry, it's a lot of memorizing. Memorize this, memorize that. It was really boring to me. But when I got to college, general chemistry, organic chemistry, you start to learn about the why and the possibly whys behind the all the chemistry, and that fascinated me a lot, especially learning about arrow pushing. If you
yeah,
think about arrow pushing, it really is a story about how an electron got from here to there, and in the middle of that, the molecule transformed from here to there. And so being able to learn the why. The I think part of the not being a good test taker is that it's difficult for me to accept, for example, an equation. To calculate this is the equation. I just cannot accept that unless I really understand the why. And I think that my organic chemistry professor really did a good job teaching about the whys and the possibly whys behind organic chemistry to me. Tunghai University is like it's a kind of a liberal arts school. So each year we have about 50, less than 50 chemistry students, and so
Mhm.
you get a lot of student teacher interaction. Um, I would say during college I was kind of weird student because I had zero interest in partying. It was so it just I had no interest in that. I was very interested in studying, and I spent a lot of time studying because especially organic chemistry was very interesting to me. I did not like quantum chemistry, uh, and I did not like physical chemistry. And I also was actually quite poor in the lab. I enjoyed the lectures. I enjoyed the organic chemistry lectures a lot. And I wanted to be a good organic, hands-on organic chemist. But every time I go to the lab, I made yellowish goo something.
It's
I consider myself an organic chemist at heart, and I think that the the start of that really was meeting having an extremely good organic chemistry teacher at Tunghai University.
yeah, yeah. I mean, being a good experimentalist is a whole different ball game, and like whole different, even like art to itself and expertise. Does anyone really like quantum and physical chemistry though? At first, does anyone really like that kind of those subjects? I don't know. I took them.
I
I took
think
them
there are
during.
people like that out
I took PChem second semester PChem on COVID. Um, so unfortunately for me,
there. Uh-huh.
I think the professor was fine, but it was just like I'm a 20-year-old in COVID right now, and I'm not gonna focus on this right now. Like I'm not gonna like I was just not gonna do it. But coming to graduate school now, one of our people in our group, Tony, who you might know, he's very
Hmm.
computationally heavy, and he kind of retaught me a little bit of quantum, a little bit of computational and physical, and now I've kind of grown to appreciate it more. So you know, kind of seeing that again, now I've grown a more appreciation for it, and now I'm definitely interested in it at the very least, anyways. So I hear that. I hear that. So now the question though is like how did you, because you did your graduate degree at the University of Georgia, and so I kind of want to hear
Yes.
your thoughts on how you, well, one, I guess, got the courage to move across to America, leave your home country, and you know how did you come to that decision? What were kind of the what was like the process along that ride?
I mean, I think after it hit me that I will not be an artist and that I'm going to be a scientist, I always kind of knew that I wanted to be a researcher, and I think a faculty and a researcher. And I think part of that is because my father is a professor at the university, and so I kind of got
Mm,
to see up close what that lifestyle is like. And so I think I chose it more based on the lifestyle that I saw of a professor. And I think mainly it was the prospect of the freedom of thought and the freedom of time.
yeah,
When you're a faculty, your research is your freedom of thought, and how you want to do it and when you want to do it. It's kind of your life and your work is kind of merged together. But I liked that aspect of it, and so the United States is one of the best place to do that. And so and I actually grew up. I grew up in Taiwan, but I lived in several places between 2 to 6. I actually lived in the U.S. and we're in the Midwest, and we
okay,
went back to Taiwan, and later, we moved to the UK for a year. So going to a foreign country was not, it didn't feel too scary. It felt more exciting than scary.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that, so that makes a lot of sense then. Um, yeah. So how I guess so how did you so you knew I guess coming out of undergrad like at least you were very perspective about becoming a professor type of role. But how did you stumble upon the University of Georgia? Because I know you worked
Well,
for the late Professor Paul Schleyer, who I think passed away in 2014. Um, but
now you put your Schleyer.
Schleyer, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
That's
Is it
fine.
French?
No, it's a German.
German, okay.
Um, but so I actually I've made several attempts to escape from chemistry.
Mm.
After you know, I went to college to study chemistry, but then it's because I wanted to become a biologist. So after 4 years, here comes a chance again. I'm gonna run away from chemistry and become a biologist. So actually, when I applied for graduate school in the U.S., I applied for maybe like 20 or 30 schools, uh, and 80% of them biology programs. And I applied to just like 2 or 3 chemistry programs just in case, and University of Georgia was one. I didn't know about Paul Schleyer at the time, and well, I got into none of the biology programs. I got into 2 of the chemistry programs. One of them being University of Georgia. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go to the University of Georgia, and I looked up the faculty list and found someone who I might be interested in working with. His name was Tim Dorr, a photochemist. So he's an experimental photochemist. Very ironically, because now I work on photochemistry.
Yeah.
So that was my. I thought I'm going to go to the University of Georgia and learn to become a photochemist. But it's I took Paul Schleyer's class the first semester, and actually the bonding class that I teach at the University of Houston is kind of
Mm.
mapped after his lecture notes. That the class just kind of it blew my mind. It's just so surprising, and the way I feel like I am not doing the course justice. He When he teaches it, it is so good. Um,
Mm.
I think after that first semester, or somewhere in the middle of that first semester, I just thought, I want to work with this person.
Yeah.
I still remember the first time. You can tell a lot about how your relationship is going to be based on your first interaction with a person.
Yeah.
My first interaction with Paul Schleyer, and I'm really glad to be on this podcast because it kind of took me back on memory lane and reminded me of this incident. I walked into his office to ask him some questions that I had of the course. And basically, I drew a p orbital and I colored one side black. And I asked him, can we color both sides black, or can we leave both sides white? And then he kind of just stood up very quietly, walked to his bookcase, and took out the Bill Jorgensen Molecular Orbital Theory book and gave it to me. And he said, "You should read this." So I'm very grateful that he took me into his group despite my first question.
It's humble beginnings. Humble beginnings. That's really funny. Well,
Well,
you had the courage to ask that question, right?
but I figured that at the time, Paul Schleyer is way, way, way ahead of me. There is no question that I can ask him that will increase that gap even more. And I think because I realized that I was actually very open in asking any question that I couldn't understand. Even
Mm.
when I joined his group, a lot of times he will explain to me, okay, here's this fun problem. Um, and I couldn't understand it. So I was like, I'm sorry, I can't understand it. Can you explain it again? He'll explain it again. I still don't get it. And so I'm like, I still don't understand why. Why is this like this? This would go on like 2, 3 times. Um, And it's not like he's a especially patient person. Sometimes his pacemaker would start beeping, and I know that okay, he's starting to get impatient. But I think that was very good for me. And a lot of times, even when I find something with research, I try to tell him I think it's like this, and he said, "Oh no, it's not." I will
Mm,
try again. Maybe I didn't explain myself well. This is actually what I mean. I think it was we had a very genuine interaction, and I think I really enjoyed that. Not only, every morning I talk to him every morning. Every morning I park at the parking lot. I walk past this newspaper bin, so I pick up some newspaper for him. I would go to his office, and we will have like a half an hour to an hour long discussion on chemistry, on manuscripts, or any questions that any he has a good nose for chemistry, so some good chemistry problems. um,
yeah.
I mean, besides daily interactions, we also wrote to each other a lot. We wrote emails to each other a lot, and I think that really allowed me to see like the inner workings and how is he thinking about problems.
Hmm. Yeah. You definitely cherish all those moments too, for sure. That's really cool.
Yes, yes.
That's really cool. You had those all those moments. So, um, what were some of the types of problems that you were tackling in his group? Like, what were of interest for you?
All types of problems, like or physical organic problems, actually. Some related to molecular strain, some related to, of course, aromaticity and anti-aromaticity. It really was. I think a lot of people, when they say, "Oh, you work for Paul Schleyer, you must have worked on aromaticity," but in reality, we worked on a whole bunch of different types of physical organic chemistry
Mm,
problems, reaction mechanisms, structures. I think one of the things that I've learned the most from Paul Schleyer was how he was a master of looking at a molecule, and then he knows what's going on. So he would ask me to do a calculation. I do it, and he'll look at that piece of paper, and he said, "Oh, that's perfect. Now write a paper about it." And then you kind of have to catch up with his thought. Like, what did he see? What did he see there?
mm.
So it's a lot of considering molecules in many different perspectives and finding the instructive insights from these different perspectives.
I guess something that
Um,
I'm still a bit curious about is because you obviously wanted to do like like biology, but you joined a kind of physical organic theoretical computational group ish like kind of area. So
mhm.
like what was the like why? I guess.
Yeah, I think this is the type of when life throws a curveball at you, just go with the flow.
Okay.
And I think for me that that unexpected turn was kind of it was a great turn.
Okay.
A lot of times you think that you're running, but it's actually the turns that determine the outcomes of your life, and a lot of times you cannot control that turn. But when it
Hmm.
happens, you take it, and it's exciting.
That's yeah. Okay.
But really, it was his course that really blew my mind, and I really enjoyed interacting with him.
Yeah. And just so everyone's aware, so the type of research you were doing though was computational chemistry. Like that's
Yes,
at least that was the tools you were using to answer these questions of.
yes, it was
Um.
mostly DFT calculations.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Um, but as a computational chemist, I'd say that throughout my PhD time, maybe 30% of the time was spent computing something, and 70% of the time was spent writing, because you submit the job, you have a lot of time.
Yeah.
And Paul is a master writer. He really is a master writer. If I were to describe him in like two traits, he has a great nose for chemistry, for physical organic chemistry problems, and he is a master writer. A
Mm.
lot of times I send him a abstract that I have, and then he disappears into his office for a whole afternoon. And when that afternoon ends, he brings you an abstract that he edited, which is rewrote, and it is just masterful. It is just completely masterful.
As crazy. Um,
So I think that really set a good example for me to
sure.
pay attention to the importance of writing.
Mm, yeah, I mean, especially like especially a concept that can be really abstract, like physical organic, like being able to articulate those words. You want people to read it, obviously, so it has to sound really good. You know, so
Yeah.
that's definitely a very it's a you need mastery skilled at that. Like, you need to be skilled. You can't just you're not going to learn that overnight for sure. Um,
Oh, it takes a lifetime, I think.
yeah, and but it's really cool. He kind of set a really good example, and like you're always trying to strive towards that. Like, I think that's still a pretty good goal as well. Like, both in teaching and like writing and how to think about chemistry. It's definitely something really cool, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that you before you were asking me one of like if I had any favorite moments in grad school.
mm,
I think one of my favorite moments actually was the time that I told Paul that I couldn't write. I remember it was an afternoon. I think I was maybe in my second year. It was afternoon, and I think people went for lunch or someone. For some reason, I was the only person in the lab, and he came downstairs and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, we have these new Chinese visiting students. I would like you to help them with their paper, like help them prepare a manuscript." And at that time, I was so that was a period of time when I was so confused with how do you write a good paper. So I just looked at him and I said, I don't know how to write a paper.
mm.
I was almost at the verge of collapsing. I was telling him, I don't know how to write a paper. But then he looked at me, and I think that was one of the most encouraging words he ever said to me. He just told me that, look how much you've grown since you came in the past 2 years. Look how much you've grown. You
Wow.
can write a paper. And I think miraculously after that afternoon, I could write. Not perfectly, but I think
Yeah.
his words kind of gave me the courage to, keep moving forward, just keep going.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that was one of the moments that I really cherished a lot.
Yeah. That's really cool that you had that interaction. Um, how was life like in Athens though in general? I know you mentioned before you're not really a partier, but like, what were some of the things you did like outside of the lab, or if at all?
Oh, I did a lot of things out of the lab, as scientists, graduate students, faculty. I don't think we should be working all the time. Um, I enjoy nature a lot, and my now husband, but lab mate at the time, um, we would drive north towards the foothills of the Smoky Mountains on weekends. Sometimes you can wake up at 5 a.m. You get there by 7 a.m. Or if you wake up early, you can get there and watch the sunrise.
Yeah.
But we enjoyed nature a lot. We adopted a dog. I spent time with my dog a lot
Mm.
and tried to reproduce Taiwanese foods by the limited ingredients that I could find around Athens.
Yeah.
So cooking, enjoying nature. Um,
Is Athens like a big school? Did you go to like the? It is a big
Athens
school,
is
right?
it's a college town.
Ah, okay.
Houston is really the first big city that I've lived in. So in Taiwan, I told you that I lived in Hsinchu. It also is the city with two major universities. So mostly throughout my life, I have been living in college towns.
Mm-hmm.
In the U.S., in the Midwest, I was living in West Lafayette, a college town. Athens is a college town. So,
Hey.
I've been living in college towns my whole life until now. Like, I mean, before I came to Houston, I didn't know yet what a huge city has to offer, but I was very comfortable in college towns because everything is close to everywhere, and you get parks and trails.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you go to any of the football games though?
One. I still still don't know the rules. Actually, I went to one, and I think that was the one that we were for sure. We knew we were winning, and so people didn't want the ticket, so I got a free ticket. So I went there just to experience it. I used to only follow the football schedule just to know when I should not drive out of my house. Because one day I made the mistake of going out for dinner and then coming back like 3 hours later because it hit the end of the football game.
Yeah. I just because they won like the national championship like I think really recently, the University of Georgia. So it's a very big football town. I can see you're
Yes,
super
it is.
excited about that. I can see you're super excited about that.
Yes, it is.
No, I tease a little bit. Okay,
With
so
football, it's just like the game starts and everybody all falls down, and then
yeah, yeah, it's I think American football is definitely a most interesting sport if you're like not American because it's like no one else has it at all. So and even I still don't really understand the rules. Honestly, I still don't. I'm not going to sit here and claim to be a football like fan. I'll watch it casually, but anyway.
yeah.
Um, so okay, so you graduated with at Georgia, graduate student. I think you worked as a research assistant for a couple of years, but then as a postdoc or maybe both.
It's all the
Whatever.
title.
Doesn't really
The
matter.
title is a title, but basically, I worked for Paul for 9 years. The
Mm,
first 6 years, I was a student, and then the next 3 years, I was a post postdoc slash scientist slash something.
mm.
By the end of the time, my time with him, the group really was just me and him,
Yeah.
like
Okay.
2-person group.
Yeah. Well, he's probably he's got to be on the verge of retirement by then, right? So I know.
I
Um.
don't think he would have. I don't think he would have ever retired.
mm,
I think chemistry is too much fun for him.
Fair enough. I can only try and emulate that. You know that feeling. But so how did the opportunity at Houston arrive then? Like I assume you were looking for faculty positions. Um, and I
Well,
guess.
I did a faculty search, a job hunt for 2 years.
Mhm.
The first year I didn't get an offer. The second year I got an offer from the University of Houston. So, I think I'm very lucky to come to the University of Houston. I went on the I remember I came to the University of Houston for my interview around two weeks after Paul passed away.
Mm,
And I think for me, I feel like if I did not get this position, I don't think there would have been another opportunity for me the next year. I would
mm,
not have a letter writing. I would not have a very important letter from him. So I think the timing and the opportunity and that the university gave me that UH gave me was just
I mean,
I'm so thankful. I am so thankful.
yeah. I was gonna say it couldn't have worked out better. I guess really. I guess in some sense. Um, but what do
And
you?
I think the process is
Go ahead. Go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I think that the process of a faculty job hunt can be, it's up and downs, and a lot of times I remember at some point I'm just thinking, oh, I'm never gonna get this job. What am I gonna do? Maybe I should I teach Mandarin in the U.S. or
Still can.
draw things and sell them on Etsy?
Mm, mm. Um, but this kind of brings us to really most important part of the podcast. I think is kind of your research now, and this is where I kind of just let you kind of run with it. I guess the biggest thing I do want to ask about is more about anti-aromaticity versus aromaticity and how we can think about that. So one is kind of explaining those two concepts, but also because in the chemistry world, I think at least from the organic chemistry world, especially the experimentalists, like we're so focused on the aromaticity part of it that we like never work on the anti-aromaticity and how that could be used in applications. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, I also I understand what you mean.
I kind of want to hear your thoughts on all of that in general, and I'll kind of go
Okay,
from there.
I'm gonna give you all of that, but I think we can start from well, first of all, I'm a computational organic chemist, so I think by that, I'm kind of like a chameleon. Anything you can put into the computer and compute, you can ask questions of it and you can study. And my research is often associated with the concepts of aromaticity and anti-aromaticity. And the thing is that a lot of times when I tell people that, a common reaction, either by verbal response or by micro expression, is like, isn't that a dead field? Like, why are you studying about aromaticity? And I think that the truth is that there are no dead fields. When you ask new questions, there are no
Mm,
dead fields. If you think about the history of aromaticity, it's a 200-year history starting from the 1825. Faraday isolates benzene, calls it a bicarburet of hydrogen, because they don't know what the structure of benzene is. So you can say that, for the first 100 years of the history of aromaticity, the key question, and a very good question to ask at that period of time in history, is what is the structure of benzene? Now, J.J. Thomson discovered the electrons close to the 1900s. So that first 100 years, without the knowledge of an electron, of course, a good question to ask is what is the structure of benzene? And then now comes the second 100 years. And I would say the second 100 years is kind of like an explosive development in the concept of aromaticity. A key question that people were asking is, so what is the definition of aromaticity? You've taken my course, so there's
I
3D
actually haven't.
aromaticity. Oh, you haven't?
I have not taken your
Okay.
bonding class.
All right. So,
I'm
there's
sorry.
3D aromaticity, metalloaromaticity, stacked, excited state. You can have aromaticity in transition states, in spherical fullerene type structures. And actually, the concept of anti-aromaticity also appeared in that second 100 years. And I think now we are kind of in the beginning of the third 100 years. We should not be asking the same questions for the field is not dead, because you have to ask a new question. So, how can we apply the concepts of aromaticity and anti-aromaticity? And I think I can give you an example. And since you mentioned anti-aromaticity, I think that's a so cyclobutadiene, it's kind of on the wanted list of chemists for around 60 years. Chemists have spent 60 years of efforts trying to capture cyclobutadiene, which dimerizes at 35K. It's a 4 plus 2 cycloaddition. You can try to complex it with the metal. You can try to trap it in a carceran. If you can't trap it, if you can't make it, what is the interest? But so now a lot of groups, and including my group, one interest is that if you can pi fuse a 4N core. So let's say you have a 4N anti-aromatic core like cyclobutadiene or pentylene or S-indocine. By itself, they all like quickly dimerize or decompose. But if you can fuse aromatic pi rings to them, you make them isolable while still retaining the feature of anti-aromaticity, which is a small HOMO-LUMO gap. And that turns out to be very good for electron transport. So you can make organic electronics and charge transport structures with these anti-aromatic cores. And that's kind of a modern interest in this. What can we apply the concept for?
Mm,
I can give you another example in the direction of reactivity, and this also is very close to a theme in my group right now. Um, Benzene is aromatic in the ground state. If you photo excite it in the lowest pi to pi star excited state, it becomes anti-aromatic, and actually it rearranges to fulvene and benzoline, which is a white explosive powder. So, there is a lot of energy in this excited state anti-aromatic system. Um, we've used it to explain the efficient photo deactivation of DNA. Um, and excited state benzene, it's about a 90 kcal per mole, 85 to 90 kcal per mole energy. What what can you do with this amount of energy? What chemical transformation can you do with it? Can you twist bonds? Can you break bonds? Can you, drive proton and electron transfer reactions that might be, useful for energy conversion or all sorts of useful reactions. So it's useful.
I was gonna say you can do a lot with like 90 kcals per mole. You do a lot with that.
Yeah, the aromatic stabilization energy of benzene is 30. Now you have this excited state anti-aromaticity of benzene, which gives you 90 kcals per mole of cash. What are you going to do with this amount?
Mm-hmm. It might be helpful just to briefly discuss what aromatic and anti-aromatic means. You might want to let's briefly discuss that real quick.
Yeah,
Give a
so I'm going to follow a stricter organic chemist definition that is not necessarily the same as what you have in the textbook. But generally, if you have a molecule that is planar, flat as a table, and it has electrons that can delocalize, there is a certain number of electrons that makes the molecule more stable than it should be, and thermochemically more stable than it should be, and a certain number of electrons that will make it less thermochemically less stable than it should be. And that kind of is where the idea of aromaticity, more stable than it should be versus the anti-aromatic, less stable than it should be idea comes from. And this kind of translates into the type of reactivity and the type of structures that the molecules will adopt.
So I guess on anti-aromaticity, because other than the last time I really talked about it was like sophomore organic level when they introduced aromaticity versus anti-aromaticity. So other than just like, okay, let's say we can even keep the cyclobutadiene example. So was it 4 pi electrons, right? It's anti-aromatic. Like, what does that like mean? Like, what does that even mean? Like, okay, it's anti-aromatic. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, other than saying it's anti-aromatic, like, does that have any like value?
Well, I think that, as I explained to you before, there are some real world applications
Sure,
of that right now.
sure.
But from if you take a more molecular orbital approach to explain it, it's basically you have a very small homolumo gap. And so your molecule is extremely reactive. When you have a molecule that is anti-aromatic, the electrons want to quickly go away.
Okay.
And so when you have that, you can have, and right now people are realizing that that is not just a fundamental interest that this type of molecules quickly decompose or quickly dimerize, is that we can harness that driving force for some reactivity or for some function.
So the small lumo homo gap on that. So is that so if the electrons make that gap, are we talking about we're breaking the anti-aromaticity then? Is that the function that is happening?
Yes, yes, you can use that word. A lot of times I use the word kind of escaping anti-aromaticity.
Okay.
Anti-aromatic molecules always want to escape the state of being anti-aromatic because they are
Oh,
you can think of it of one of my collaborators, Henrik Ottesen at Uppsala University, kind of used this analogy of there's this Scottish horror novel called uh, 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 the, the Hyde and Jekyll. There's the respectable Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You have a calm, well-mannered benzene, and then when it becomes anti-aromatic, it becomes this evil character with a completely different characteristics.
that is really interesting because you know it really is only a difference of like an excitation, and like you get all these different let's say even it's like fundamentally different properties, which is really, I mean, from a physical organic point of view, that's just interesting to think about, um, and also like computationally for sure. I guess on um, on the, I know we talked about some like applications of like anti-aromaticity, but what are some other like fundamental questions that you're trying to ask about these sorts of complexes? Like what's in like the current literature? So like apart from like the applications, but like what is more fundamental questions people are asking about like anti-aromatic compounds that are shaping the aromaticity versus anti-aromaticity, um, let's say landscape for the next like few years or so.
I think there really is the how far can we push this concept to real world applications is kind of the current interest, and that application can be in many areas. It can
Mm.
be, how do drugs degrade under sunlight, photo degradation of drugs. That can be related to an excited state anti-aromaticity relief. How do you design a very good charge transport molecule? How do you design, a photo molecular switch, small molecular machines that you
Mm.
can use the concepts of aromaticity and anti-aromaticity there. A new kind of interesting question that we are asking in my group is how can you grow a nanotube using the concepts of aromaticity and
Oh.
anti-aromaticity. There, when you're a computational organic chemist, there are lots of questions that you can ask and play around in the computer with. And in my group, we as a computational chemist, I think that the experiments are really the heart of chemistry.
Mm.
So we make we explain things and we make predictions, but at the end of the day, it's best if we can see it in realized in the lab. So we like to, you know, when we have something fun in the computer, we try to contact some experimental chemists and see if they can try it out in the wet lab.
Mm. That's really cool that you guys are able to really just ask these questions like on the fly in some sense and just do it. What are what?
Yeah, two ways. It's two ways. And experimentalists come to you for explanations, but we go to them to test our predictions.
Mm, it's very good two-way street there. What other kind of research interests are your group looking at as well?
Um, Mostly what I've just described.
Mm.
The many different applications of aromaticity and anti-aromaticity. And this kind of touches on a lot of different fields. It goes into the field of supramolecular chemistry, into photochemistry, into materials chemistry. And so actually my postdocs and my students, they are the experts of all of these detailed fields. At some point, I cannot catch up with all of this branch that we're branching out. So I rely on them to be the expert on all of these topics.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
work well.
I was gonna say, well, that makes a great advisor is when your students are definitely becoming the experts for sure. Um, so you know, yeah, I'm very excited to see um, how these anti-aromatic compounds will be facilitated in the future, because I think it'll really will change the game of how we even think about like organic chemistry fundamentally. Because I mean, for so long, like it's still like taught as like aromaticity is a stabilization effect, and then people will talk about
Yes, yes.
they'll talk about like anti-aromaticity is destabilizing, but then that's kind of it. Like that's like all there kind of really is to it. So it'll be interesting to see like where like this field goes and how we can reshape, future chemists to think about like aromaticity versus anti-aromaticity. You know.
Yes, I mean there is a very active community of experimental groups working in this area of polycyclic anti-aromatic hydrocarbons and their applications for organic electronics.
Mm. Yeah, I think some other things I wanted to kind of ask you about is I know you have the Oh God, hopefully I forget the acronym. God dang it. Theoretical Physical Organic Chemistry kind of
Ah,
symposium.
the TPOC meeting.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know. I know that's what it stands for, but I guess you'd call it a group or a meeting. I don't know.
It's it's theoretical physical organic chemistry meeting. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a mini symposium, monthly mini symposium that Dean Tantillo at the University of California, Davis and me, we started out in the pandemic. I mean, at first it was kind of more to stay connected with the community without this, because there were no conferences going on. So that was the initial, like, to stay connected. But I think now it has evolved more of into like it's a platform for students and postdocs to share their research in a friendly community and a very supportive and inclusive place.
Hmm.
Um, the topics are on physical organic, but actually we've had both students from experimental and theoretical groups present. Some students that see us on TPOC, they may be from an experimental group, but they email me and I include them and they've spoken. So, maybe TPOC should be changed to TEPOC, theoretical and experimental physical organic chemistry.
It's growing. I know I popped into I think one or two meetings before. Um, they're
Ah, okay, that's great.
yeah, they're quite. I mean, I think they're interesting. They're great. They're little symposiums that
Yeah,
anyone
I
can.
mean, and periodically we also organize special TPOC meetings. Like we invite um, some well-known or established theoretical chemists to share about some soft topics, not necessarily on chemistry, but more on, Roald Hoffman shared a story on art on Lavoisier, and share about life stories. Sasson Shaik, Ken Haugal, and most recently Jeff Seaman, who is a chemical historian. These specialty puck meetings are interesting too because we kind of cover a softer side of the scientist's life.
People forget, these let's say well-known scientists or professors. They are just people too, who have life, who have interests. So I think a lot of people forget that. Um, but I kind of want to. That kind of brings us back nicely then to I guess your art. Kind of want to get back into that a little bit here, because I know you
Mhm.
draw. It's on your website. I'll definitely link your website to people that want to see it. But what do you? How? Like, I know you've always been interested in it, but did you like take classes on it or anything, or did you kind of like more self-taught type of stuff?
So first of all, most of the art on my website is done by Lucas Caras, my
Okay.
uh, this postdoc slash graduate student. There is only one picture in my on my website that was done by me, and that's the one with one hand and the other hand with a hydrogen atom in the middle. And actually, one of the hand is Lucas's hand. The other hand is actually the hand of my first postdoc, Jiahua. So only that one was done by me, but most I learned from YouTube a lot, I guess. But the thing is that I like to draw every day. I think it's I think as a scientist, it's very important to learn to take care of yourself, and it's the job of a researcher. It's not learning, but it's creating knowledge. So it's not entirely about working hard. It's about having a fresh mind. And so
Yes.
two things that I do every day is that before work is that I think I have to do it before work, which is sketching or painting and go on a long walk. I think an artist's job and a scientist's job, there's actually a lot of similarity. Art is like science. You're practicing how to remove prejudice. If I ask you to draw a leg, you're probably going to draw something like a long shaped thing. But actually, the shape of a leg depends on how you look at it. If you look down the foot, it's actually a spherical uh, picture, a spherical shape. And so when you do these practices of sketching, you are really removing prejudice and seeing what really is there. And I think for me, I think as a scientist, that also is something very important. For a lot of times you think that you should be seeing one result, but if you don't remove that prejudice, something might jump out at you and you might not see it. I think, if it's okay, I will share a example of a story. Many chemists could have discovered the Diels-Alder reaction. This person, Thiele, who is you can call him a demigod of pi conjugation. It's
Okay.
20 years before the Diels-Alder reaction. He thought, if you take cyclopentadiene and a paraquinone and you do a condensation reaction, take H2 from cyclopentadiene, O from paraquinone, take away water, you can make a very extended pi conjugated product. But of course, he gets the Diels-Alder product instead. But if you don't remove that prejudice, I want to see that extended pi conjugated product. But the Diels-Alder product happens instead. And
Mm.
this was 20 years before Diels and Alder figured out this cycloaddition reaction. And in my own research, I actually have similar what I call Thiele moments. When I first arrived at the University of Houston, my research was on aromaticity and hydrogen bonding.
Hmm.
The hydrogen bonds are stronger if when they form, they also enhance aromaticity. And so I started to think about, what about the excited state? Can you have a light responsive hydrogen bond? And so I asked my postdoc, Dr. Judy Wu, at that moment, to test this idea of an excited state hydrogen bonding controlled by aromaticity. And he said, "Oh, the proton moved." And I said, "Well, maybe you should optimize the structure with a shorter NH bond so the proton doesn't move." And then he optimizes it and the proton moves again. And then this time I'm like, freeze the proton. Don't let the proton move. That was my prejudice that I wanted to see the excited state hydrogen bonding. But this later developed into our PNAS paper in 2019, which showed that relief of excited state anti-aromaticity drives proton transfer reactions. And so I think like that Thiele story, and like when you draw a dog, this you really have to see what is there. You're looking at an object and you're sketching it. You have to see it for what is really there. And so I
Hmm.
think there is some commonality of practicing to remove prejudice.
That's a really good way of putting it. I haven't thought about that, especially saying that you need to, like, I know in the lab sometimes, like, if I'm getting frustrated, like, I have to leave and do something else. Like, I can't, like, sometimes I literally can't do it at that moment. I need to go do something that'll clear my head. And, sometimes your mindset is not in the mood for science. And there really is like a balance there where, um, if you're not in the mood for science, like, you need to clear it. And then once you're cleared, then come back to it, to these problems. And, that's really
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, I think that these moments happen a lot, and it's normal,
Yeah.
and it's okay.
It also is good. It's also relieving to hear because, I feel like, especially like many graduates, who feel like there's the pressure of like of the publishing and I got to get work done. But I mean, your mental health is way more important. Your physical health is way more important. Like you have to work hard, obviously, but you need to make sure all those things are in check before you're able to really do like good science. I think for sure. At least that's my personal opinion for
I
sure.
think it's tied together. It's tied together. If your job is to study very hard, then you can burn 20 hours a day and you can study hard.
True.
But research is not with the textbook thing, everything is laid out before you. All you have to do is try very hard.
Yeah.
But with research, everything you would like to know is unknown. Everything that you would like to know is actually in the state of chaos. So
Mm.
you really need a clear mind.
But you also put it a really interesting way that I have not thought about before, like removing prejudice. Like, especially for a scientist, it's kind of really refreshing to hear. Like we have these results that you really want to see, but or maybe you're looking at this problem with this unique or like this only point of view. You need to get a third eye view on this, or I've never really heard that before. I kind of like that that train of thought.
It's hard sometimes, and I fall into that trap a lot because you have a hypothesis and you really want to see this,
Right.
but sometimes something more wonderful is just tangential, and you need to give it space to emerge.
Hmm. Yeah, I think. Yeah, that's really cool stuff. Um, what do you for drawing? Do you kind of like draw anything, or do you kind of have like your certain?
Um, I have a lot of different subjects that I like to draw. On days that I'm busy, I mostly draw five dogs. So this is actually something that I do almost every time before I go teach. So this is in last fall I was teaching. My class starts at 10 o'clock. At 9:50 I will start drawing. Sketch five dogs before you go teach. That's kind of my rule for myself. But I also like to sketch, like a urban sketching style. You draw views of buildings. I also like drawing people's faces. It's like chemistry. It's like computational chemistry. Whatever you can put in the computer, you can study. Drawing, I can draw lots of different subjects, and I like to use lots of different media as well. Sometimes watercolor, sometimes ink, sometimes colored pencils.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think I can keep learning different techniques and different subjects. So I like that.
Mhm. I I haven't, man. I haven't painted since like a sophomore undergrad. It's certainly it's very nice. I love painting like I like seeing like sunsets and like mountainy stuff. Have you seen the YouTube videos of oh my god, Bob Ross? Like have you seen those videos?
A long time ago, yes, I know of him, and I've seen his when he talks about the happy accidents.
Yep. His well all of his videos are on YouTube and they're extremely nice to put on like before going to bed or something like that. And
Mhm.
it's like dang, um I wish I could do that. And I can.
You can. I think it's a choice. Sometimes I talk to my brother who is he's a video game designer, and I tell him, I'm drawing, and he said, how do you find time to draw? Like as a faculty, you're so busy. How do you find time to draw? And I think it's though he said, how do you have time? But I think it's not that you have time; it's that you decide to make time. I
Yeah.
think it's a active decision that I am going to spend time doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Everyone has time for their priorities. So it's like whatever you decide to make your priority, you will make time for it.
Yeah, it's a decision of how you want to use your time.
Mhm. As we begin to wrap up here, I'm kind of curious to know, do you have like any like general advice for like students who maybe like international students or like, coming to America, like graduate students, um, coming over America for like the first time? I know you kind of moved across,
Um,
but kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that.
so I think I hope I can call it an opinion and not an advice, because I think everybody keeps changing, and in 20 years I might tell you something different, and
Fair
there are
enough.
also many different paths to happiness and success in life. Um, but I think that, and maybe this applies to just graduate students in general, is that
Mhm.
I think it is worth your time to learn how to tell good stories, either by speech or by writing. you know when you have a good piece of data, it is more likely to reach the full potential if it comes with a well written good story. And I
Mm,
think the thing is that scientists, we are taught to document, to be objective. But then you get these advice from writing books like, oh, know your audience. But my interpretation of know your audience is actually know how to elicit an emotion from your audience. And that emotion can be positive or it can be negative. But if your audience is an organic chemist, or if your audience is a theorist, or if your audience is your grandpa, how are you going to say something that will trigger a response, a surprise or a puzzling feeling? But I think, unfortunately, our first exposure to scientific writing is writing lab reports. Here's the introduction, here's the results and discussion, here's the conclusions. There's no the most important element, which is to trigger an emotional response. That practice is not there. You don't think about what your TA's response is when your emotional response is when you're preparing a lab report. But I think that our job is we are scientists, but we are also writers of scientists. So, like the job of an artist, I think our job is not to document, but to design. If you have a piece of data, how do you design the story around it so that it will trigger an emotion and invite questions for a next story? A lot of times before I start writing, I don't start by thinking about, okay, these are the facts that I have to present. It's the when I start the story, when I start writing this paper, who am I writing to, and what do I want them to feel when they read this, when they read what I write? Any irrelevant side fact, it, if you have an irrelevant side fact that doesn't elicit an emotion, it should not be there. I think it's kind of like it's a common saying in these urban sketching community that a great storyteller never lets facts get in the way of truth. I think that is very true for scientific writers too. How do you make the best story out of your 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 science?
Yeah.
So I that would be my not advice, but an opinion that it is really worth the time to think about how to communicate science.
Yeah, I know you put that as your opinion. I'm gonna say that's great advice because I do think I just like I could because I agree. I do and generally think that many scientists, well, even like the let's say like even like the best scientists, like when I'm sitting in talks or seminars, the best seminars are always like people who have the best story to tell and are able to communicate that information because the I feel like the science and the data will kind of speak for itself, but it's how you like present that. And if you can present it really well and you have a good story, then that just blows it out of the park, and people are engaged and people are interested. So
Yeah, I think you can feel the care when the presenter or the writer cares. You really can feel it from the text that they
mhm.
care about. They care about triggering an emotional response in you.
Yeah, yeah, and that's definitely yeah. If you're doing technical writing and you're so focused on just the data, you don't want to get lost in that because and I feel like a lot of times like some of the information like doesn't really matter. Like people like I don't know. It's a very like intricate game, but I definitely hear what you're saying. I think that is definitely a very important skill that I hope to develop over the next few years, like becoming a better writer. Especially like coming out of like high school. Like I was never like I don't really care about writing in some sense. But now it'll
I mean, I'm still learning. I think it will take a lifetime to learn. I think you
right.
just keep learning and you keep going forward. I think it's like if you are drawing, making an analogy to drawing, if you are sketching a cathedral that is very majestic and you want to convey the feeling, you want to induce the feeling of this is a majestic cathedral, but there's a car parked in front of it, there's an umbrella somewhere, there's a trash can somewhere. Those are the facts. They are there, but you don't have to draw them. Don't
Mm.
let the facts get in the way of the truth. And that's like, you have a lot of data. You The truth, the most precious part of the story, what is that? The other facts can go into the SI,
Yeah.
but finding the truth story that you want to tell is like finding the best way to to show how majestic this cathedral is
Yeah.
without letting the facts, the cars and the umbrellas and the you know get in the way.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. I'm gonna keep that. I'm gonna keep returning to that when I begin my writing processes in my graduate school journey. Um, but I want to thank you very much for your time, Professor Wu. It was really fun having you on today, and you
It
know,
was really fun chatting with you too.
yeah, I hope I'll see you around campus. But I'm excited to see how I said it before, but I'm really excited to see because I also saw you published recently on like aromaticity and like general computational methods and how we can use that in applications that came out relatively recently, I think. So in gen
On Baird's rule.
possible yeah, I know that was the nature one, but I want maybe it's from a textbook. I don't
Yeah,
remember.
the nature chemistry. We published a perspective on nature chemistry on Baird's rule. So the last year was the 50th year anniversary of Baird's rule, the
Hmm.
reversal of aromaticity and anti-aromaticity in the excited state. So we kind of talked about how the field is now blossoming, is at the tipping point.
Yeah. I because I'm really excited to see how how this field changes, right? How does it fundamentally change how we teach organic chemistry, but also like some of the greatest minds in this world, how can they actually use this information in applications and to see what that can do? And I'm really excited for that that flip, that inversion. So, but I think without further ado, thank you again, and thank you folks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.
Bye.